Did you ever doubt yourself in terms of your ability and your research and your studies? Did you ever say to yourself, like, man, if I can't, figure this out, then all of my work is for nothing?
Well, no, I never thought it was for nothing, but I certainly doubted whether or not we were going to be able to figure this out.
Really?
Yeah.
And
Well,
if you thought, and at that time you're extremely educated, research, you'd seen a lot. Did that give you a fear of like, well, if I can't figure this out, then no one can?
Of course. Well, her prognosis was multiple early joint replacements, and that was the good news, because the bad news is, well, how many? And how many can you stand? And when does that kill you? So her real prognosis was plenty of pain with an early death. Because even now, like the surgeon who talked to her yesterday said, well, because he talked to her about the risk of amputation in the future. It's like, well, this is the second joint revision. It's like, maybe this will last 15 years. We don't know what the hell's going to happen then. Well, so our response to that is, that's 15 years from now. It's like, who knows?
Deal with it then.
Well, things are better now for how people understand how to replace an ankle than they were, I think it was 10 years ago that she had this one replaced. And it helped. It wasn't perfect. Her hip is perfect. The ankle has always been trouble, but way less trouble than it was. And so, well, you struggle forward the best you can. And so I suppose she could adapt to an amputation if that was necessary, but at the moment it isn't necessary. But multiple amputations is not something to really be looking forward to when you're 16. And they were going to put her on corticosteroids to control her inflammation, and that would have produced Cushing's disease, and so that makes your face all puffy and it makes you gain weight, and so it's very physically disfiguring. So we decided not to go down that route. And but it's worked out. Thank God. It's quite the miracle. And she had a baby a year ago, and we were never sure that was going to happen. So
congrats.
Thank you.
Congrats to you.
Yes, that's for sure. So now we have this respite where she's healthy. And the last time I saw her, she was looking great. Like she's just glowing. She's so healthy. I can't believe it. It's just beyond belief.
Congrats on all the hard work you've done to make it a possibility. You spent a long time.
We avoided the worst excesses of hell during the catastrophe, so that's something.
Yeah.
And it did allow her the space to figure out. And my wife had always thought that diet had a relationship to it, and we investigated that. Like, there's a good literature that shows if you have arthritic symptoms and you stop eating, if you fast, they go away. So that's interesting. It's like, well, food must be causing it. It's, but once you start to eat again, no matter what you eat, comes back. It turns out, not no matter what. Almost no matter what. Because she's sensitive to virtually everything, but she isn't sensitive to meat. And so it turns out that if you eat meat, you can live. So that's a big difference between being sensitive to everything and not being sensitive to one thing. And so it's a harsh diet. It's made traveling difficult, although I can eat in restaurants because most restaurants can cook a steak with nothing on it, and that's made things much easier while I'm traveling. But whatever, it's working. And so thank God for that.
Amazing. Do you think, hypothetically, if your daughter was healthy and never had any of these complications, that you would be the man you are, impacting people, the success, the attention you'd be getting? Do you think you'd have as much impact?
I wouldn't have written the 12th chapter, that's for sure.
Do you think in general you would still be able to have the ideals, the belief, the fortitude that you have to reach people and really impact people?
I think so. But I know what you're saying. Your question is, well, to what degree is adversity character building? And the answer to that is plenty. But I was already, like I said, and it was the same with my wife, we weren't naive people, because I had an extensive clinical practice. I was dealing with heavy level adversity always,
It wasn't
25 hours a week.
It wasn't your daughter.
No. But there were other problems in my family and so forth that I dealt with as well. And so we'd already, I think, garnered most of what we could from confronting adverse situations. Now, did that add a different level to it? It probably probably fire tested our relationship, our familial. It probably brought our family closer together, all things considered. I saw the same thing happen when my wife's mother died. She died of prefrontal dementia, and she developed it quite young. It started to really manifest itself in her early 50s, and she died when she was 70, and she fell apart over 18 years, and she was very physically healthy. And her husband, who was quite the man about town when he was a young guy, real extrovert, he was a real character in our hometown, he took care of her so well, it was absolutely jaw-dropping.
Wow.
Every time she slipped, he'd step up to the plate, and he took care of her until he couldn't lift her out of her chair anymore. And he was getting old too. And so she wasn't in an old age home for very long. And then we were around when she died, over the couple of days just before her death. And her family, her sister is a palliative care nurse, her other sister's a pharmacist, and Tammy's had the experiences that I already described. And then her father really stepped up to the plate, and so the whole family gathered around for that, and they acted impeccably throughout it, I would say. They took care of their mother very carefully while she was dying, and they pulled together. And one of the consequences of that, which was so interesting, is that although their mother died, and that was a terrible loss, their bonds that connected them, all of them, strengthened to the point where I would say that was almost compensation for the loss of their mother. So that was really interesting to see what happens even in a dire circumstance if people do what they can. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to work for every situation, because I know people get cut off at the knees, and sometimes you hit a tragedy that's fatal, that you cannot rectify. It's a real catastrophe. But it was very interesting watching that, because they were alert and awake around the deathbed, and they weren't fighting with each other at all. There was no familial squabbling, because you can imagine that would happen, because everyone's stressed. And then you can just imagine how terrible that would make something that's already awful. There was none of that. They focused their attention on her. They gave her water when she needed it, and they watched her, and they made this terrible thing the least amount of awful it could be. It definitely pulled them together. Yeah. Like that whole family, including me, is closer because of what they went through and also how they went through it. And it's probably the case, well, I would say it definitely advanced the maturity of my son, because he was called, and I told him, look, kid, you can't add anything to this. We're up to here. Yeah. You have to conduct yourself properly, because otherwise everything's going to shake and fall. We can't have more of this. You can't bring anything unnecessary into this. And
he was an all-star.
It was remarkable,
champion.
Man. And he was only in grade 10 when most of this happened. And your friends are pretty damn important when you're in grade 10. And he stuck around a lot to be helpful. So it was really good for him, man. Yeah, well, he's a good character. He's
amazing.
He's quite something. And he was very helpful. He was very helpful to his sister. They had their fights, obviously, and she was often unreasonable, and no bloody wonder. When you're strung out and
you can't feel anything but pain.
Yeah, God, she went through so much. Like even watching her withdraw from the opiates, because she was on them for about a year and a half. She just quit. Hey, well, as soon as she was done her surgery, it's like, I'm not taking these anymore. And she had formication, which is the sensation of ants crawling under your skin. She had that for like a month, and God, unbelievable. She just sailed through it. It's like, I'm done with these.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys have been through a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot, man.
What's your biggest fear now, moving forward in your own life?
Oh, making a mistake at the moment, because I've been the subject of so much public attention in the last 2 years, and I've been in a situation where, even things I didn't say have also almost been fatal, because people take them out of context.
Right.
But my biggest fear has been that I do something careless, and that there are big serious cascading consequences to it.
Do you feel like you've done something careless, or?
Everyone's done something careless.
Right.
But I've been pretty careful. I mean, I was fortunate. So when this political scandal blew up around me in Canada, when I opposed some legislation that I thought was reprehensibly constructed, the radicals on the left in particular came after me hard. But I was fortunate because, they called me every name under the book, and went after my character. And, I suppose there was some degree of that was understandable to some degree, because if you stand up against something, if you stand up against the radical right, well, maybe you're a communist. Might not, probably not, because you don't have to be a communist to not like the radical right. But if you stand up against the radical left, well, maybe you're a Nazi. Well, probably not, but you might be. And so it's certainly in the interest of the people who are proponents of the philosophy of the radical left to assume that you're a Nazi, because then they don't have to deal with you. And so that's what happens. You throw yourself into the fray. People try to localize you, and they do that by saying, well, maybe you're this, maybe you're this, maybe you're this, maybe you're this. It's like, well, yeah, maybe not too. But I already had 250 hours of lectures up on YouTube at that point, so people could actually go and see what I had said, because virtually every word I'd ever said to students in a professional capacity, not every word, because I didn't tape every lecture, but I taped multiple years of lectures, and so people went over those with a fine-tooth comb trying to find out if there's anything I'd ever said that was, and they couldn't find anything. And that was because I've been very careful with what I say. 25, I started paying attention to what I was saying, and trying very hard not to say things that I would, trying very hard not to say things that something in me objected to. So, and well, that seems to have provided me with a buffer. And so people came to my website because they were interested in, well, before the political stuff blew up, I had 1 million views on YouTube, which isn't nothing. 1 million of anything is a lot. But then when the political scandal started to break, then people came for them but stayed for the content. And so, and that's been really useful. Well, it's been, well, and it's not that surprising. Well, you know, because of what you do, it's like there's a great hunger for information that is practical and useful and that helps people find meaning in their lives and orient themselves. There's a great hunger for that. And most of my lectures were derived from solid psychology, some of it experimental, some of it biological, some of it from the domains of neuroscience, a lot of it from great clinicians. It's not surprising that people find it helpful because, well, great clinicians were great because they were really helpful. And so to distill that and to offer it to people in a digestible form, to have that have a good effect on them, well, that's what you'd expect. That's what the whole discipline is about. And so that's been great. These public lectures that I've been doing, so I think I've done 50 of them in about 45 different cities now in about 3 months. And the average theater size is between 2,500 and 3,000 people. Amazing. And they're unbelievably positive events because people come there and we talk mostly about the political spectrum and why there's room for voices on the left and why there's room for voices on the right and where the parameters of that should be, because both of those can descend into extremism and that's not good, and the role of individual responsibility and individual sovereignty and the necessity for people to develop a vision, the sorts of things that we already talked about. And virtually everyone that's coming there, they're not coming for political reasons, even though that's the story you hear from the more ideologically possessed journalist types, because they see the world that way. They can't imagine anything else could possibly be happening. But the people who are coming to these lectures are coming because they are doing everything they possibly can to make their lives better.
That's it.
And so, and it's lovely to talk to people like that because
it's amazing.
It is. It's great. It's literally great.
School of greatness, baby.
Right, exactly, exactly.
I've got 6 minutes to be mindful of your time and your schedule, and I want to ask you 3 final questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, you bet.
So as much as I would love for you to go on for another few hours on these answers, so I can get to the last question,
I'll do my best to be brief.
Well, I wish I could go on longer, so we'll have to have you come back next time you're in LA. The first one is, what is your purpose now moving forward? Through everything you've had in your life, what's your purpose moving forward? Well,
I have specific, what's my purpose? What am I aiming at? Well, I did a series of biblical lectures last year. I did 15 lectures on Genesis. I'm going to continue doing that. So in November, I'm going to start with the Exodus stories. And what I'd like to do over the next 15 years is make my way through the whole corpus of biblical writings. So that's one major goal. I want to write another book. I've written half of it already, which will be a follow-up to 12 Rules for Life, because I actually had laid out on a site called Quora 40 rules. And so I'll do that. And write another couple of books, I suspect, over the next few years. The touring, I'm going to continue. I have 10 cities coming up in Canada and another 20 in the US, and then 12 in Europe, and I'm going to go to Australia in February, and then back to Europe, I think, in April. So there's lots of touring on the horizon, and it's for the reasons I already described. The lectures differ every night, although there are themes that constantly emerge, and I'm using those as an opportunity to have a detailed and engaged discussion with the audience about how we might proceed forward individually and collectively so that we can make things consciously better, and why that's associated with necessary meaning and why that's a moral obligation. So it's a dialogue about responsibilities and not rights, even though rights are only important insofar as they set up the space for you to shoulder your proper responsibility. And as a sovereign citizen, you have the responsibility for the integrity of the state resting on your shoulders. And it's something that if you don't take seriously, then the state shakes, and that's not good. And so I'm trying to convey that to people. It's like there's actually something that you need to do. You need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of your family. You need to take care of your community. And if you don't do that, then there'll be hell to pay. And it's on you, right? Each of us. And it's hard for people to grasp that. Well, they don't want to, first of all, maybe because they don't want the responsibility. But then they don't get any meaning. Then they suffer. Then they get bitter. That's not good. So it's like, which of these are you going to pick? But it's also salutary to people because it's useful for everyone to know that if you don't live up to your potential, that you leave a hole in the fabric of being. And it's filled by something approximating hell. And unless that's what you want, then you shouldn't be doing that. And it's perfectly possible to have a serious discussion with 3,000 people about this, and they're right on board with it all the way. And so that's really something amazing to behold. And one of the things I've realized is, although these new technologies, the technologies you're using, enable these long-form discussions, turns out that people are smarter than we thought. Right. TV narrowed it, right? It's like 30 seconds. Say your complicated thing in 30 seconds. Like can't. And so we were viewing the population through this narrow window, and everyone looked kind of stupid. It's like now the window's fully open. It's like, oh, look at that. You people like 40-hour Netflix specials that are incredibly complex. Right. And you like 3-hour Joe Rogan discussions that are complicated. You'll follow the whole thing. It's like, oh, good, we're smarter than we thought. Thank God for that, because we better be. So that's where I'm aiming in the future.
That's your purpose. Got it. Love it. If you're looking for more greatness in your life, make sure to check out this video right here. And also check out our free PDF, The 3 Secrets to Unlock the Power of Your Mind to help you change your life. Download it right here.
I just don't want to try to solve any deal with money when I could have solved it with emotional currency. I'm saving my money.